The Badlands, running the Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Breaking History. Today is September 18th, 2024. Got a message from Matt earlier this morning. He is not feeling well. He's has some issues going on with his throat and can't really speak clearly. So he said it's probably best for him not to come on today. But I was going to do this solo, but then about an hour ago, just messaged Brady and said, "Hey man, would you want to jump on?" And he said, "Yeah, let's do it." So Brady, our good friend War Hamster, joins us today. So good to see you. How are you today?
I'm good, man. It's a pleasure to pinch hit for Matt, and thanks for thinking of me.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So we've been doing a couple of impromptu shows now for the past few weeks. The spirit of the show is really to talk about the news cycle through the lens of history, which you and I have done more times than I could possibly count over the past, 2 to 3 years, in private conversation and public conversation. So this should be pretty easy for us in terms of just flying by the seat of our pants. The past 2 weeks, though, Matt and I have been doing these like philosophical kind of high level discussions. And I think and we agreed that today we definitely needed to get back to the news because there's so much that's happened in the past few days, but really in the past few weeks, even more stuff. So, before we get into the geopolitical news cycle, because there's plenty to dig into there, I kind of wanted to just get your take, Brady, and you and I haven't talked about this really much offline, so I'll be hearing this for the first time myself. But your take on the Trump assassination, CanCon and I discussed it on Daily yesterday. So anything you want to say, anything you want to go into, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I missed your show yesterday, so if I'm going to repeat anything, and I'm sure I will, we think similarly along these things, but I'll see if I can do to come up with a couple of original takes. Well, the biggest thing is, of course, the Secret Service failed once again. It's just absolutely disastrous. The excuses they're making are, pretty poor. I mean, it's worse than the dog ate my homework. When you hear that, well, we did give full protection because he's not the current president. That's not the way protection works in the Secret Service. It has nothing to do with your position. It has to do with your threat level. And there's nobody on the planet that has a higher threat level than Donald Trump. I think Dan Bongino said it the other day. If the Pope's a 100, Trump's a 99. And you go all out and you make sure he gets protection, but they're not doing it. The other thing, just today, apparently outside of New York or New Jersey, Trump's going to have an appearance, and they found the bomb sniffing dogs, found a car. They sniffed one out. And as of right now, I don't have any updates. I haven't checked the news in an hour, but apparently the guy got away on foot. But I'm sure they'll be able to track that down. I think the really fun part about it, because, I'm always, everything I talk about is always going to come back around to the Constitution, is Ron DeSantis looks like he's doing the right thing and trying to keep the investigation of the Mar-a-Lago attempt. He's trying to keep the investigation in state. Now, the feds are going to try to take that over, but it's going to be a really fun showdown on federalism. If you think about it, the crimes that he was charged for so far are all state crimes. I think it was a stolen car, all that stuff. The only thing the only way the feds could really maybe have a case is he probably crossed state lines with some kind of contraband. But it could be a really fun federalism showdown. And, we can go down a whole big rabbit hole over the Judiciary Act of 1789, where the federal courts took on jurisdiction over state matters that was absolutely shot down at the Philly Convention. That was never supposed to be the intent. States were supposed to be able to run their own affairs. So anytime I see an opportunity for a showdown for federalism, I get a big smile on my face and hope, because we're pushing the needle more in the last 5 years than we ever have towards that direction. That's where we need to go.
Yeah, for anybody wondering, I don't know if there's anybody I've talked to more about federalism and the Anti-Federalist Papers than Brady. Brady also, I don't know if you still, I think you still do this. You still teach the Constitution classes every week?
I haven't been. Doug, Mr. Constitution, Douglas V. Gibbs, and I still do. We started a series of shows called the Refederalist Report, and we're digging through all those types of topics, anything constitutional. I think our next topic is on, we just did, should the 17th Amendment be overturned or be repealed? The answer is, of course, yes. Next one we're doing is Reynolds v. Sims. which would be the state version of the 17th Amendment. And we'll have that out next week. But yeah, he's still teaching the Constitution. We will probably jump back in and do that again once he finishes this cycle.
Man, one of these days I need to get put a panel together of like you, Chris Paul, maybe Kyle, just to talk about this stuff. Cause I don't know if there's anyone who spent more time on the Constitution when it comes to whatever it is that we do here, than you. So I think that would be a really interesting conversation, because I know Chris has been spending a lot of time reading the Anti-Federalist Papers lately, and Kyle certainly spends almost all of his time reading DOJ documents and court transcripts. So I think that could be a really interesting panel one of these days.
It would be. I'm just finishing up a reread of Madison's notes, and I'm trying to catalog it so I have easy reference on a Miro board, so I can find all these different quotes per topic, and it's fun.
Interesting. Well, so real quick, because I haven't heard anything really about the DeSantis stuff. So could you explain to us what is happening with the investigation with DeSantis, and when you say keeping it alive, what do you mean by that?
Well, right now this guy was Roush. I don't even know how we're pronouncing this guy's name.
Ruth, I think. I have no idea. Ralph. Yeah.
I'll go. Let's go with Ruth. That sounds good to me.
Okay.
Right. He got arrested by a Florida cop, and interestingly, they didn't scrub the social media instantly before they released the name, which they normally would. So the people out there have it all. I've been through a bunch of the tweets. This guy's a nutcase. He's about as pro-Ukraine as you could possibly want. Looking for any excuse to, the guy wants to be a hero some way, shape, or form. Probably the easiest recruit of all time. Where I think it's fascinating about him is when he, I guess, gave his plea in court yesterday. He talked about his financial situation. The guy lives on a fixed income of $3,000 a month. Yet he's able to travel all over the world. He just booked a trip from Hawaii to Florida. He's able to buy a high-end AK-47 of GoPro, all that stuff. Where's the money coming from? Is the obvious question. So DeSantis says he's going to keep the investigation in the state of Florida. He's in Florida, Florida DA or AG, whatever the title is. And I think that's interesting, because if the feds investigated the same people that are trying to put Trump in jail, and you're going to have them investigating another failed assassination attempt. So now we're up to 3 that we know of just on this campaign trail. Yeah, it makes no sense. So
interesting. Yesterday we had Colonel Tanner Watkins was in the chat on Badlands Daily, and so just impromptu, we invited her to jump on if she wanted to talk about. Did you hear about the failed assassination attempt in Venezuela?
I did.
Yeah. So because it was the Green Berets, there's reportedly a Green Beret involved. We asked her to come on and talk about it, and so she did. Operation Condor. Didn't know if you had any insight or take on that, but just wanted to give you that opportunity as well.
Well, Venezuela is fascinating because usually you would think that our deep state would like a guy like Maduro, who's full-on socialist and all that. Where it gets interesting is, and I was a guest on a radio show a couple of times over the last month with a guy by the name of Jameson. What is his last name? I'll think of it in a second. Anyways, the Colonel Towner introduced me to Jameson because he had her on the show talking about Gladio stuff, and he started asking about the financial ties to the intelligence operations. And Colonel Towner says, well, you got to have Brady on your show for that stuff. One of the things I talked about was how the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, what they do is they'll get these third world countries in debt as kind of a prelude to future color revolutions. That's how they're able to muscle, get the politicians they want in there. And you go back through that history, and you'll find post-World War II, our State Department / CIA, even though they're the same thing, they want people in power that they can control so they can exploit the resources. And when you get a nationalist, the word is populist, you get a populist in power, whether it be populist for the people like we think our movement is, or you get a populist socialist, they have a tendency to nationalize the resources, and the multinational corporations then can exploit. So that's what's going on with Maduro. Is Venezuela at one point had the highest amount of IMF or World Bank debt of any country or per capita, and they're actually passing percentage-wise Argentina, which is really hard to do. and Maduro is not paying that back. So that's why they want him eliminated. That's why they're not, they're not acknowledging his election. I have no idea if it was real or not. I'm not real crazy about some of the Venezuelans that have come to our country because of the gang activity, but it's interesting to me why our deep state doesn't like Maduro. And I think it comes down to the nationalization of resources.
Interesting. These are the kind of insights that I can count on Brady for, because that is a really interesting little caveat. That's something that I haven't really heard anybody else discuss. You talk about the debt and the payments. If I'm not mistaken, there were similar allegations made about Argentina that ultimately led to what's his name, Malay getting in there.
I'm still trying to figure out how to pronounce his name. The guy's so far he's been great on policy, and he's got a true libertarian bent when you hear him speak. It seems to be working. Argentina's GDP is taking a little bit of a bump up lately, so I wish them the best of luck. Argentina used to be the wealthiest country in the Southern Hemisphere, and Venezuela used to have that title too. They're both very rich in resources, highly educated population. Where Venezuela was very highly educated, and that one generation of socialism will do that to you.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting point about Venezuela nationalizing its resources, because we've seen that's what led to the Iranian revolution, or not revolution, but the installing the Shah in the early 1950s was whoever came before him, whose name escapes me at the moment. Mossadegh, yeah. He was going to nationalize the oil because the British had it, and that's why they removed him, and they put the Shah in, who was pro-West, and then of course they removed the Shah 25 years later and put the Ayatollah in.
I don't think we removed the Shah. We tried to keep the Shah in power. It just didn't work out for them.
Yeah,
I think that was another populist. That's why the United States has been saber rattling with Iran for the better part of 4 decades, is because they did nationalize the resources. How dare these people want to keep their resources for themselves?
Yeah. Well, by the way, we have been seeing that happening all over Africa, especially in places like Burkina Faso, where Ibrahim Traore, the young 36-year-old military captain, who overthrew the military junta that came before him, which was obviously a NATO-backed military junta, and is now working very closely with Putin. He's nationalizing their resources. He's doing it, I think, in a much more intelligent way. He's not just seizing the resources. It seems like they're going about it, from what I can tell, there seems to be a little bit more of a legal process where they're actually taking them away, they're legally removing them from the ownership, and then somehow they're giving them to or selling them or auctioning them to other companies. But it does seem like that guy's operating. Africa in general, I think, is taking the resources back, and all these leaders in Africa are making really good points that we are the most resource-rich continent in the world. Why are we all so poor?
No, you're poor because you are the most resource-rich continent, and the Europeans decided to exploit that for 400 years, and that was done intentionally. You used a really interesting word. You used the word legal, and I've talked about this. Matt had me on a guest on one of his other shows, and I talked about the ISDS, which are the investor state dispute settlements. And I'll go into a lot more detail on that with a video. When I put together the video of the radio show I did with Jameson Haygood. That's his last name. Sorry, Jameson. Awesome guy. You got to meet him. He's definitely a sharp guy and one of us. With the ISDS, it's a world court, basically unanointed. It doesn't have any kind of power, but every time you see trade deals like NAFTA or anything like that, they're going to have these attachments, these 500-page agreements that basically allow for the name of the agency. It's part of the World Bank is ICSID, I-C-S-I-D, but the ISDS, Investor State Dispute Settlements, they allow multinational corporations to sue a domestic government if, and here's the key, they have some kind of policy that may impact future profits. And that's a direct quote of how they're worded. These are in almost every single trade deal for the last 50 or 60 years. And there's these international courts, a 3-person tribunal. There's no appeal, and billions of dollars go through these ISDSs, and it basically hamstrings world governments from being able to take advantage of their own resources and or protect their own environments, from bad mining operations. And this has been going on for decades, and it's a dirty little secret. But you talk about who really runs the world. It's these multinational corporations and these international bankers and lawyers that write these deals. And there's hedge funds out there that basically fund corporations so they can sue countries, and they'll take a cut of the pie. And it's a very successful investment strategy. So when you say they're doing this legally, well, what you and I consider legal and what this international court thinks is legal are two totally different things.
Yeah.
So I wish them luck.
Yeah. Well, so one of those multinational corporations would be Glencore, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So if Glencore is the number one asset commodity trader, I believe, in the world.
I bet if you pull up a search right now and just go Glencore ISDS lawsuit, see how many you can find. I bet there's dozens of them.
I'm going to do that. But Glencore is the company that Maduro targeted in 2018. He was given the laptop from hell in March of 2017 by a scorned ex-wife of one of his oil officials. And on the laptop was just all this proof that his oil officials were colluding with Glencore executives and other oil executives, like transnational corporate executives. And so Maduro then goes and hires that lawyer who had done, who went after Microsoft in 2001 and went after Prince Andrew on behalf of Virginia Giuffre he did it pro bono. He also represented some pretty nasty characters like Harvey Weinstein, but that's what lawyers do. But he hires him, and then a year later, the guy files a bunch of lawsuits against 40 oil executives, March 2018, and civil action lawsuits in U.S. courts. Basically like criminal charges, but in civil lawsuits. And as far as I can tell, the material that was yielded from those court cases, I think, fed into some of the executive orders that Trump did, who then turned around and went after some of those Glencore executives. And then we just heard about a month or two back, Alex Beard, the former Glencore CEO, gets indicted. And then actually last week, he pled not guilty to those indictments for fraud and other things that Maduro was going after him for. And so that means, I guess, we're going to have a criminal case in British court against Alex Beard. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
There's a lot of interesting legal cases going both directions. The one I'm keeping an eye on right now is in Honduras. There's an ISDS case going on right now that'll bankrupt the Honduran government. A couple American mining interests. But the other one that's not getting enough talk is the antitrust cases against Google. Those are going to change the entire internet landscape if they go the right direction. I don't think the EU is playing games on this one. It sounds like they've got a very strong case, and the U.S. Department of Justice apparently has a pretty strong case against Google as well. And it's about obviously the advertising monopoly is the easiest one to prove, but these things take years, but there's glimmers of hope on the legal landscape every once in a while.
Look at this. So I just did what you told me to do. Is I went and I typed in ISDS Glencore, and I got this story. Glencore entered guilty pleas to foreign bribery and market manipulation schemes, and I'm pretty sure, just based on the timing of this, the May 2022. I'd have to go double check this, but I think this is related to, it says Venezuela and Brazil. It doesn't say anything about Africa here. Let me search Africa real quick. No, okay, so this is the same one. This is the same one that I cited this article for, or this document for when I was talking about Trump using executive orders. This is what I'm talking about. Trump used executive order 13818 to go after Dan Gertler, who had the mining rights in Africa, and all this started because of a investigation into Venezuela and Brazil oil bribery charges, which came from Maduro. So it's like this is kind of like the connector, the vector that kind of connects that effort to the Trump administration, which then connects it to Putin and all these other guys who the UAE, the Saudi Arabia, who are now seizing control of, or taking control again legally, like they're purchasing these mining rights. So they're not just like taking them. They're purchasing 51%, And then I think the government or whatever the state oil company of the respective countries, I think retains 49%. So anyway, it's very interesting that you had told me to do that, and then this comes up.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny how much this ties in. The topic. The first time you and Matt invited me on your show, we talked about United Fruit Company and the origins of the Banana Republic, and how we, private hands have been using the U.S. military and intelligence agencies to create commercial opportunities and profits. And it's the same. This goes back, in America over 100 years, and you want to take it out of the British East India Company. We're talking about the 1600s, the British East India Company. It's the same pattern over and over again. And there's a name for it. When you have the government and corporations working together, we call that fascism. And and it's not Republican or Democrat, because it's the same policies no matter who's in office, with about 3 exceptions. JFK, was trying to get away from it. I wouldn't say Carter was an exception. He's more of an anomaly. But you have Donald Trump, and we've talked a little bit about why the deep state decided to remove Richard Nixon. And I think it has something to do with him challenging that foreign policy, even though he's originally a CFR guy. I've never gotten to the bottom of that, but I'm working on it. Any thoughts?
No, I mean, it's Nixon to me. The more I haven't looked into him a lot, but he kind of comes up in these other rabbit holes I go down. And it does seem to me like he got set up to some extent. I mean, I think a lot of people, that's not like a unique theory. I've heard a lot of other people say that, but
you want me to lay that out? You want me to lay that out for people real quick? The connections of why we know he was set up.
Yeah,
the guy who led the Watergate break-in was a guy by the name of E. Howard Hunt, former CIA. E. Howard Hunt also happened to be in Dallas, Texas, in November of 1963. Which when Kennedy was shot. E. Howard Hunt was also there at the Bay of Pigs. He's got quite a few CIA connections. And that's where you start going down that thread, and all the connections start showing up. You get into Allen Dulles. Then I can start talking. We can start talking about. Why am I drawing a blank on this guy's name? I'll come up with it later. But there's a whole lot of rabbit holes. But if you just start with Watergate and E. Howard Hunt and work backwards, it just everything just opens up.
Interesting. Well,
John J. McCloy was the name I was trying to remember. Huh. I just did a full expose on him, and I'm going to keep going digging more on that. But that guy's one of the godfathers of this whole plot in America. We don't have time in one show to jump into that, but one of these days I'll have to. We'll have some fun with him.
Well, I'm curious. Do you have any insight? Because I did recently learn the one thing about Nixon that I recently learned is that him and Trump exchanged like over 200 letters, like years ago. And I don't know if you know anything about that, but I'm just curious if maybe Trump was picking his brain about being an outsider, because I mean he was an outsider as far as I understand it.
See, that's why Nixon's such an enigma, because he did work for the Council of Foreign Relations for a decade. He was Eisenhower's VP. How much of an outsider was he really?
That's true.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the answer. I have not done a deep dive into Nixon. There's so many conflicting stories. He's put out there as this, awful boogeyman, but he also won the biggest landslide electoral victory in history in 1972. I'm sorry, the second biggest landslide. George Washington, of course, being the first because he was unanimous.
Yeah, true. That was before there were any political parties.
Speaking of which, do you know who the first United States spy chief was?
Who was that?
That would have been General George Washington. He actually had that title.
Oh, yeah, because of the Culper spy ring, right?
Bingo.
Yeah, there you go.
He actually had that title. People forget that all the time.
Yeah, and for anyone who's curious about what that is, you're going to need to set aside some time, but a really good series that I've gone and researched and verified that I think the series is more accurate than, there might be a few liberties taken with it. But have you ever seen the History Channel series? I think is it Turn? I think it's Turn, Washington Spies.
I have not seen that. I got a good friend, Alan Myers, who does he's a speaker around the California circuit and does a few shows. He's done a couple of presentations on that, and he really focuses on a lot of those spies were women.
Yeah,
and, there's some. Yeah, so he does the Women of the Revolution, and he's the one that turned me on to that. But the one you're referencing, I've not seen yet. I think I'll go look it up though.
Yeah, it's really good. I think it's only like 3 or 4 seasons, but it's very, very well done. It focuses on like the cult perspiring, obviously, which were civilians who became kind of like, they weren't necessarily pro-war at the beginning. Some of them were, but some of them weren't. Some of them were actually loyalists, and then they then just by happenstance kind of fall into this position of being part of the spy ring for Washington, and it really explores the relationship. This guy named Andre, I think his name was Andres. He was a British spy who his whole like mission was to catch the spy ring. So his whole mission was so it's like this cat and mouse game where he's trying to figure out who these spies are. He's having like an affair with which sounds like was true. He's having an affair with Benedict Arnold's wife or fiance. He's actually the guy who turns Benedict Arnold against Washington, because Benedict Arnold was George Washington's like best friend, which is why he's considered one of the greatest traitor of all time, because Washington considered him like a brother, and then he betrayed Washington. It's a really, really good series. It's worth watching. I certainly didn't spoil anything by saying any of that. That doesn't ruin anything, because you know who Benedict Arnold is the second he comes on screen. But it explores like all of the intricacies of the story, and as far as I can tell, it's pretty accurate. So, and then Andres gets caught eventually by the colonists. So it's a great story, and I encourage people to watch the show. But anyway, I want to kind of get to some of the news cycles. We talked about covering that today. What are your thoughts on this cell phone, the pager story?
When I first heard it, my first reaction was there's really 1,000 people that still use pagers.
Yeah.
And then I realized how much sense it makes, because if you're using cell phones, they can geolocate you all day long.
Yeah.
So what you do is you don't post up in your burner phone until you get the page.
Yeah. Which is what the Hezbollah leader said, like back in 2005, is he said, hey, Israel has the ability to, this is before anybody even knew that Israel had the ability to do this, but he said, hey, Israel has the ability to turn on our cell phones. And he said, every cell phone in the world is a microphone. So he said, stop using cell phones, only use pagers, apparently. And that's because of, I think it's Pegasus is the software that does that.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
That's the one we know of. I'm sure they've got stuff that, we've never even heard of at this point.
Yeah.
Bottom line is, what is it that, what's the Israeli group? It's 82, section 82, or is it 820? There's an 82 in it, but that's the Israeli special electronic warfare division. That's
8200, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I know I had the 8 and the 2, right? I didn't know how many digits we were going with, but they were behind this. I'm not going to get into the tech stuff that I don't understand too well, but sounds like they intercepted a shipment and were able to put something in there that allowed them to overheat, which made the battery implode. I don't even know how that works.
Yeah, I mean, I heard like Fox News segment this morning when I was my mom had the TV on when I was dropping my kids off at her house before work, and according to Fox News, which is not at all an authority on any of this stuff, the pagers were assembled in Budapest. Like the company in Budapest was the one who was assembling the pagers. Like that's their actual business, and so whatever was put into them, it would have been done probably there. Which just raises a lot more questions about how this was done. But I mean, my take on it in the news brief, which you may or may not have seen, was that people can cheer about the terrorists being targeted, and whether or not they're even terrorists is certainly a discussion that's worth having. But from their perspective versus objective perspective versus Israeli perspective, but consider this: the people who ultimately would have been behind this, which would have been Western intelligence forces, also consider us to be terrorists. And so at what point is this sort of technology going to be implemented against, political dissidents in the West? And I think that's something worth considering.
It is. Jester of Knights corrected us. It's Unit 8200. Thank you, Jester, in your chat. Unit 8200. That sounds correct.
Yeah.
Of course they're going to use it against us. The big takeaway, one of the big takeaways from the whole Ukrainian conflict is how much drones have changed modern warfare. And people are learning lessons from this. I asked a buddy of mine who's real big into self-defense and this stuff. Like, what would our defense be against, if the government were to turn drones against us? We got 100 million armed Americans. We're the biggest army in history. just the American civilian population. It says shotguns, birdshot.
Yeah.
And I saw a video last week of a drone chasing down a couple of Ukrainian guys. They're running away, trying to shoot them with their, field rifles, whatever they're using. And a single shot isn't hitting this thing. And the guy eventually destroyed the drone by throwing his rifle at the drone and hitting it, and exploded.
Well, I'll tell you, man, there are a lot of people where I'm from that hunt birds, who probably, I think a lot of them don't own pistols. Like, they aren't firearm enthusiasts necessarily. I mean, they support the Second Amendment because they are hunters, but they only own shotguns. So that's a interesting insight there. I think we'd have a lot of shotguns with birdshot. I also saw that. So yesterday, it sounds like they exploded thousands of these things. It looks like the numbers are 2,700 people injured, not anywhere from 9 to 12, like 12 people, I think, is the final death toll, but including 2 young children, like 2 young kids were killed by these things. So I think we got to point that out.
Well, and of course, Hezbollah is going to absolutely retaliate.
They've already said so. And then the reports are that, as I've heard, and I haven't done the dig to understand this, but this morning apparently 300 or 400 more exploded today. So this is something that they're doing in waves. It seems like, and we're going to see more of it.
Well, the brilliant thing about that tactic, no matter who's, and we're not taking sides here, we're trying to talk about it objectively, but if the Hezbollah is now at the point they can't communicate via cell phone or via pager, haven't you just really curtailed their ability to function in the short term until they find a new solution?
Yeah, absolutely, for sure.
Yeah, I don't know. Whether they go back to two-way radio or who knows? But they're gonna have to come up with something. But if you're afraid to have a device in your pocket, you kind of cut off.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. And that might, and again, I think this is something that like, let's go ahead and shift to this conversation, because I want to talk about Ukraine and I want to talk about Israel, but I kind of want to talk about them concurrently, because I've been saying for a while now that I view them as the same conflict, at least in spirit, and probably the same people behind. I mean, as we can tell, ostensibly, the same people who are supporting the war in Ukraine are also supporting the war in Israel. So it ostensibly, the same backers. Zelensky has been speaking about conducting actual terrorism, like not just psychological warfare, which, you could argue is what the media does, but actual terrorism against Russian civilians. He was on a show, I think this past weekend, where he was calling for that. I think it was, I'd have to go pull and see what it was, but it was one of the MSM, like, American shows, where he was saying that he wants the Russian civilians to suffer the same way that Ukrainian civilians have suffered, so they understand the cost of war, so then they will demand that Putin end the war. And that's his tactic. And that's the whole idea behind the long-range missiles, which we've all heard of. So for those who aren't aware of what I'm referencing, basically there are these long-range missiles that can fire deep into Russia and hit Russian cities that Zelensky and the Ukrainians have asked NATO, and NATO is asking the United States to provide to Ukraine and authorize. Now, the problem is, and so Scott Ritter was on Judge Napolitano's show, and I'll get to what he said in a minute, but Scott Ritter kind of laid it all out and explained it, and he's a good resource for this, and I trust what he says when it comes to this kind of stuff. But Putin came out and said, look, the only way for these kind of missiles to operate, there's only one way for them to operate. They have to have an encrypted GPS, without getting too technical in what Scott Ritter said. They have to have an encrypted GPS that, the data and the encryption is updated, like, very regularly, meaning that you ship the missiles over to Ukraine, they have to have operators, American operators, go with them and update the software, these encryption codes constantly, so that the GPS works in the missiles. Otherwise, they're completely worthless. Meaning that American operators have to be there firing the missile, like when the missiles are fired, to make sure they hit their targets. So Putin said, if you use these missiles, if you move these missiles into Ukraine, then we are then at war with Britain, the United States, and the rest of Europe, meaning that we, Russia, are going to immediately strike cities in Britain and the United States. We already have the targets picked. We've already had the meetings and discussed it. And it's not even going to be a discussion at the point. We just press the button and the cities go. That's what Putin basically, and all of his ministers are communicating, and they're saying, you better not, like, this is a like fuck around, find out moment. That's what they're saying. They're saying, we're not bluffing. We are going to do this if you do this, because you're talking about sending missiles into Russian cities and killing Russian civilians. And if you do that, then we're going to do it to you, and then you're going to fire nukes at us, and then we're going to fire nukes at you, and we're all dead.
Yeah, and Russian
exactly what Scott Ritter said.
Yeah, Russian military doctrine absolutely allows for the use of tactical nukes, and they absolutely have the right to defend themselves. Brings up a couple of interesting conversations. You've heard some rumblings about NATO invading Russia, which is absolute nonsense. The cupboard is bare in NATO. We've given away so much of our ammunition and everything like that. It would take 2 or 3 years to do a buildup. The NATO can no more invade Russia than Russia can invade Europe. The best Russia could do is take out a few Baltic states and they'd stall. It's just not possible for a land invasion from either side at this point. So you're either talking about keeping this thing limited to Ukraine, or you're talking full-blown escalation, which is what nobody wants. Unfortunately, who's calling the shots at the Pentagon right now? It sure as heck ain't Joe Biden or Kamala Harris.
Yeah, well, and so that's what actually Colonel McGregor was just on with Justin Napolitano, because I was listening to a few of his, I was catching up with a few of his interviews. He does these little 30-minute interviews with various people throughout the week. So I was catching up from his interviews from the past couple of days this morning. And actually he went live with McGregor, I think at 11 o'clock, and they wrapped up around 11:30. So I didn't catch the whole thing, but I was listening to parts of it on my drive home from my office to do the show. And both McGregor and Scott Ritter said the same thing. They said that the people at the Pentagon are actually the ones who are stopping this, because what happened was Boris Johnson, or not Boris Johnson, is it Steinmeier, the new
Keir Steinmeier.
Yeah, Steinmeier. The British PM traveled to DC with a red bag, and inside the red bag was the list of targets of like where they wanted to hit in Russia. And he was going there basically to finalize the plans to move these missiles into Ukraine. And it was Biden. The Pentagon said, no, we're not going to do this, because what you are signing us up for is actual nuclear war where we all die. And Biden and Blinken, according to them, Biden and Blinken overrode the Pentagon, because this is now a political situation. And they said, we can't afford to lose face at this point. We're going to go ahead and do it. And then at the very last minute, at the 11th hour, this would have been on Saturday, the Pentagon officials explained to them, they said, if you do this, here's what's going to happen. 72 minutes after you do this, they're going to, basically within 72 minutes, they're going to be nukes hitting American soil, and we're all going to die. Like American cities are going to be gone. That's all it's going to take if you the moment you ship these missiles or fire these missiles into Russia. And ultimately that they did back down, like begrudgingly. And Scott Ritter was almost hysterical, like saying all of us almost died on Saturday and we don't even realize it. That's how like ignorant we are and how foolish these people are. Now, he's not read into any of the stuff that, John Harold has researched or any of that. So like he doesn't promote any of that kind of stuff. So I think he's looking at it from a purely objective lens, which is a smart way. I think we need to look at it from that perspective as well, because it's the narrative and the story. We also don't want to get too emotional about this, because we want to maintain our bearings. But I think that it's an important narrative to be out there. The fact that the narrative isn't out there, though, is interesting to me. The fact that nobody's talking about the fact that we did almost go to have a nuclear war with Russia on Saturday, or at least for those who don't believe in nukes, because as Scott Ritter was saying, you don't even need nukes to do this. The Russians would initially respond with conventional warheads on hypersonic missiles, and then we would respond by our doctrine with nukes, and then they would respond with their own nukes. So whether or not you believe in nukes doesn't matter. We do have conventional warheads on hypersonic missiles that can take out cities anyway.
Yeah, how many people know that we've been at DEFCON 3 ever since the Ukraine conflict started? That's the longest period of time we've been at DEFCON 3 since the Cold War, without being actually in a shooting war. So I'm curious if they even went to DEFCON 4 over the weekend, because we're supposed to know about that when that changes.
Yeah, well, there you go. Well, so here, just so people understand, this is what Zelensky was talking about doing in this interview. The interview, Scott Ritter and Napolitano were watching this interview and listening to him. And Zelensky sounded like an absolute psychopath. I mean, he was talking about he was talking about how they needed to kill Russian civilians in order to prove a point. They're like, we need to kill the Russian civilians in order to show the Russian civilians how foolish this war is, in order to save them from themselves and save them from Putin. I mean, it's
well, Zelensky does not
logic.
Yeah, he does not live in a reality. Zelensky's going to deny that the Azov battalion has been doing these terrorist activity on Russians, ethnic Russians in the Donbass region since 2014. He's going to pretend that doesn't happen. He's going to pretend that the Ukrainians weren't building up their army to march on the Donbass literally a month before Russia invaded. Yeah, he's ignoring all these actual facts. To show you what a psychopath this guy is, or how he's not living in reality, did you hear about the exchange he had with the Polish foreign minister?
Not specifically.
It was pretty heated. They were throwing insults at each other. Poland's now, even brings up the fact that, hey, look, we know what the Ukrainian Nazis are all about, because you guys actually, there's a famous event, I forget what it was called, where the Ukrainian Nazis invaded Poland and started basically wiping out massacring entire towns and villages, including women and children. This happened. And now they're mad at Poland because they're not doing enough to defend them. They want Poland shooting down Russian missiles for them. Well, that's going to enter, that gets direct NATO in conflict with Russia, ergo with World War III. And that's the only thing that's going to save Zelensky's bacon, because it's only a matter of time. It's tragic how badly our mainstream media has portrayed the reality on the ground. We've got to go outside the United States and outside mainstream sources to find out the truth of the casualty figures. But there's the writing's on the wall.
Well, and that's what Scott Ritter was getting at. So people may or may not be aware, but Ritter has been a contributor on like RT and Sputnik and other Russian media channels for, I guess, years. But was recently, like, the FBI came to his house, or they stopped him at the airport, I think it was, when he was trying to go to a convention in Russia.
Yep.
And they took his passport, and basically, I don't know if they indicted him or not, but they told him that he was being investigated and was in a lot of trouble, and he needed a lawyer up. And so he's like, I'm getting text messages like all the time, because I get these things all the time, asking me to come on and explain like developments, explain to the Russian media, like, what does this new treasury document mean? Like, just very, very routine kind of stuff. And he says, I can't do it because I have a lawyer now and I have to follow the procedure. And what's happening now is that the Department of Justice and the deep state has weaponized free speech, because they're using national security laws saying that these people that you are going and speaking for and speaking with are under our sanctions. And so therefore your contribution to their network or whatever is considered a commodity that we now consider like contributing to not necessarily terrorism, but akin to terrorism. You are contributing a commodity in violation of our national security laws. So therefore, you are then an enemy of the state, effectively.
Well, not only that, but these type of sanctions they've been putting on are a complete violation to the Bretton Woods Agreement, which that's basically the formation of the dollar-based global financial system. That is the legal document that created all that. You can't do these kind of arbitrary sanctions for political purposes. It's not allowed. And the U.S. is losing a lot of credibility around the world. If your assets aren't safe in the Western markets, what are you going to do? That's why currency competition is just as important as tax competition. If your money can go elsewhere, it'll go away from unfriendly places. And that's a lot of investment dollars in the West. And we're talking about a bankrupt West right now, overstretched with debt. We can't afford to be doing currency wars right now. Europe sure as heck can't. So,
yeah, we will get to that in a second, because that does tie us into Israel. But I wanted to explain this real quick. So I did a deep dive on Kursk with CanCon on Breaking Hit on Badlands Daily a few weeks ago. And just to give you context for what we're talking about, this region, the Kursk region, this is where NATO has invaded Russia. And we're talking about small units, just small units of guys, 5-10 guys at a time. Going into empty villages that have been evacuated by Russia. And it's like 10 guys versus 10 guys, and they're hunting each other, and they have armored vehicles, and they have drones, and they're doing the maneuver warfare, combined arms warfare with infantry and mechanized units. But the whole purpose of it, to what the point that Zelensky was making in that interview, is they want to take out a nuclear reactor. They want to take out the power grid in parts of Russia, so then that the Russian people will grow restless against Putin and demand Putin to end the war. And so the nuclear reactor they're going after is, if we're looking at this region, the blow up is right here. So here's the blow up. So here's like the areas that they've invaded. And these areas, by the way, I pulled up like Google Earth. It's mostly just empty pastures and forest. You have a really small town right here, Sudza, I think is how you say it. You have another these are very small towns, like relatively speaking, small towns. And so what they're going after, so here's like a similar map. Here's the border right here. So you have the Kursk power plant, nuclear reactors right here. And so that's what they're going after. They want to hit that power plant and take it out, because if they do, everyone in the region will lose power. And so what Russia's done in response is they've come down here to this area. And so you can see that's the exact same map that we were just looking at. Here's the border down here. Here's the reactor. Here's that body of water. So this entire red line is a trench that the Russians have dug. And here's an actual like satellite image of it. They've dug these massive trenches, and they're preparing to defend the power plant from NATO, which is trying to take it out. So this is gone into like the next level where NATO, because I don't even refer to it as the Ukrainian army anymore. It's just NATO. It's the NATO Nazis, not the Ukrainian Nazis. They are targeting now Russian civilians. They want to hurt as many Russian civilians as they possibly can, because in their mind, if they can hurt the appetite of the Russian people for war, that will then create a political solution in their eyes on the Russian home front to end the war and kind of subvert Putin's will to come after them. I think it's going to backfire. I think it already is backfiring.
Well, it is, because they weakened their defensive lines. Ukraine is, Russia's advancing almost at will. They're about to. I'm not going to try to pronounce some of these towns' names. It's just not in my skill set. But they're about to surround a major town. They've already cut off all the supply lines. Yep. They're going to keep. They'll just keep. And Ukraine is running out of Ukrainians. We just sent them 16 F-16s, and Ukraine only had 8 trained pilots.
And several of them have been killed. And these are pilots who trained for 2 years to fly these things, and they got killed like immediately.
Shot down by their own anti-aircraft U.S. systems.
Yeah,
at least when the first one did. This is a Hail Mary. That's all that invasion was. Zelensky's desperate. He knows, if he's getting, I know he's getting some good advice for some of these military generals. You see about, about 3 weeks ago, we saw like 2/3 of the staff resigned. So there is some shakeup there for failure. What's the gentleman's name that got a really good former general who was leading leading their defense and now has now sitting back in Kiev? He's got a chance to be Zelensky's replacement. Zaluzny, is that it? Yeah, he's the name to watch right now, because our State Department isn't crazy about him, but he's likely the successor. And he's someone the Russians would deal with.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, so to tie this all together, the reason I bring this up is because this is also another story. This is from just a few weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, August 31st. Ukraine blackmailing nuclear plant staff. So there's another power plant, and we've heard about this power plant, Zaporizhzhia, I think is how you pronounce it. And so this power plant is, just to give you some context, because it's easier to see the map when you have the colors. So the pink is where it's like, this is Russian controlled territory, and we're talking about a power plant right on the border there. And so this is a power plant that has fallen under Russian control. It's gone back and forth between Russian control and Ukrainian control. But right now, I believe it's under Russian control. And what Ukraine is doing, what NATO is doing, is allegedly they're threatening the people who work at this power plant, saying, we're going to kill your family if you don't cooperate with us and give us all the intel you can as to what's happening in that power plant right now. And this is what the psychopaths in the Western intelligence services do. They go to people and they say, we're going to put child porn on your computer. We're going to threaten to kill your family. We're going to do all sorts of psychological terrorism to you in order to get what we want. And nothing's off the table when it comes to these people. And I mean, that. So this is a similar mindset that we're seeing being implemented against in Israel, against Lebanon, against Hezbollah, against Hamas. Obviously, they already did that to Gaza. I mean, just to give everyone some context, when October 7th happened, I think based on like public polling, like whatever that means, the support for Hamas in Gaza was around like 10%. An agreement had already been signed back in like 2017 for Hamas to give control of Gaza back to Fatah, back to the Palestinian Authority, because nobody there had like functioning governmental services. And so it's like the people in Gaza weren't even supporting Hamas at that point. Now it's like their support is over 50% because the people in Gaza no longer see a viable political solution.
Well, let's go back a step further on that. Who created Hamas in the first place? And it was basically Netanyahu.
Yep.
And they did that specifically because they wanted to keep the West Bank and the Gaza separate. They didn't want them to have a united Palestinian front, so they had to have a counterbalance to the more rational people, the original PLO. So that was Netanyahu. And when you say they only had 10% popularity, that won't stand for Netanyahu. His backers in Israel are the zealots. They are religious zealots. You can see it in their flags. The one greater Israel. These people have been talking about this stuff for a long time. There's a bunch of different factions in Israeli politics, but the ones keeping Netanyahu propped up are the most hardcore religious zealots. They truly believe they're the chosen one. They have their holy land will be theirs. They're the ones that are, doing all the settlements. You've heard about the hilltop the hilltop children. These 18, 19, 20-year-old children going out there. They're absolutely hardcore. And they're doing, and of course, Netanyahu's government will back them. And what they're doing, these settlements are illegal.
The Hilltop Children, I believe, have already been sanctioned by the State Department multiple times. Not that means anything, but I'm just saying, even the State Department's like, y'all are way, way over the top in terms of how overt you are. And I'm glad you brought that up because I did write about this the other day in the news brief. This image has circulated all over for many months now.
Greater Israel.
Yeah, so this is a patch that is being worn allegedly by certain units in the IDF, and this is showing Greater Israel. This right here is the Red Sea. You have Egypt right here. You have Sinai. You have Saudi Arabia down here. You have all of Jordan encapsulated, half of Iraq, almost all of Syria, Lebanon. So this is the plan. This is the borders of it are the Nile River right here, and then the Euphrates River up here in Iraq, which runs through Iraq into Syria, and I believe it goes into Turkey. So those are the borders according to these people. And if you go back historically, this is a propaganda poster that was circulated in Central Europe in 1931, trying to recruit fighters from Europe to go to Palestine. This is from the Irgun militia. We've talked about the Irgun before. The Irgun was Zayaf Jabotinsky. His personal secretary was Netanyahu's father, Benjamin Netanyahu. And what the Irgun were known for being ultra violent. They would just walk into a town and kill the women and children in Palestine in order to create as much terror as possible so that the people would flee the town and run east. And so the idea was you clear out towns, they self-immigrate out of the towns, and then the European settlers can come in and occupy the buildings and occupy the homes. Here is their official emblem. This is from Wikipedia, the official emblem of the Irgun. The Irgun, by the way, were one of the four militias that combined in 1949 to form the IDF. And so this is their official emblem. You can see the Greater Israel map in the background. You can see the Greater Israel. I mean, it explicitly says here's Galilee, the Jordan River, Sea of Galilee right here, the Dead Sea. You can see Jordan, Israel, Saudi Arabia. You can see the Greater Israel map there. You can see it right there. And then here is the finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich. He's one of the psychopaths that you're talking about, absolute psychopath, speaking at a Greater Israel rally in France. This is in March of 2023. And if you look at the podium, this is in Paris. There's the map right there. And so at this particular speech, if I recall correctly, I think he said Palestinians are not human beings. So you're hearing the exact rhetoric that we have come to identify, at least in the public zeitgeist, with Adolf Hitler and the Nazis being now spoken by Jewish leaders in Israel, talking about the Arabs.
There's a comment in your chat from I'm not going to try to pronounce the name, talking about how Israel was a state was created by the Rothschilds. Well, yeah, they had a part of this, but what I find interesting, you start talking about the 1940s and stuff like that. At the time, Israel was armed, got all of its arms. There was shipments that were basically sent from America and basically from the Jewish mafia in America. Most people think that the Italian mafia, were the most powerful in America. No, the Jewish mafia, Meyer Lansky, probably wielded more power. They had better financial and political ties. But then you start tying that into, the Jewish mafia was also very connected to the Cleveland Italian mafia. The Cleveland Italian mafia was basically the ones who created Hollywood. The reason Hollywood got created by a bunch of Jewish directors is because the Christians wouldn't let them. New York is where they were making movies before that. They wouldn't let the Jews have a studio. So they went to California and started all over. And that's how they created Hollywood. Well, then you start getting into who controlled the Screen Actors Guild. That's the Cleveland Mafia. That's where the interesting Ronald Reagan ties, but we won't go into those. Then you look at when did the Mafia infiltrate U.S. Intelligence? And you get to Operation Underworld in World War II. And all these things start to connect. And here we are today. And you have all MI6 trains the CIA, MI6 trains Mossad. They all work together. And we have one big happy family. That is the blob that Mike Benz talks about, but it's international. He just talks about the domestic, but it's bigger than that. It's an Anglo-American, mostly pan-European rules-based order. And who sits at the top? It's just multinational corporations. They're NGOs. And they're the ones who give the orders to the intel agencies. And so they have us sitting there, we're coming up November. We're going to vote. We're going to vote red or blue, Republican or Democrat. And with the exception of guys like Trump and maybe JFK, doesn't matter who actually wins because our foreign policy has never changed.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Matt brought up a good point. One of the first times we started discussing Zionism, Matt brought up a really good point that made me start thinking about, the Rothschilds created Israel. The Balfour Declaration was a promise made from the British government to the Rothschild family to set aside this land in Palestine for them later in the future. That was in 1917. But they not a single member of the Rothschild family has ever moved to Israel or like set up residence there, which is an interesting dynamic. So that kind of led me to ask why that is. And while I haven't dedicated, huge research projects or research efforts to that one question, it is something that I kept in the back of my mind as I read through this diary. And this is a 2,000-page diary, the complete diaries of Theodore Herzl. He's considered the father of Zionism, although he actually didn't get into Zionism publicly until about 1895. And a lot of the existing Zionists at the time, who were far more orthodox and far more devout, practitioners of the religion, were kind of annoyed by him because they viewed him as a secularist. They were like, "You're not actually really into our religion. You're more of a political opportunist who was raised in Germany." Herzl believed that they should kind of drop their Jewish identity and become more European in order to better assimilate with their European partners. So he was kind of viewed as kind of not a traitor, but kind of a turncoat somewhat, like among the Zionists.
He wasn't a purist. He was not a purist.
He wasn't a purist, exactly. And so, but he writes this, he has this 2,000-page diary. He's considered the father of Zionism because he organized them. He gave them a political organization. He also put them in touch with the right people, including the Rothschilds, because he had those contacts. He had the connections with the bankers. He had the connections with the Rothschilds. And, the way the diary is set up is some of them are he just copied letters, or he put letters that he had written to people in the diary. Some of them were he would go in and actually do a diary entry, like a journal entry. Here's what I did today. Here's who I met with. Here's how the meeting went. So you got a lot of his actual honest insight into some of these people. He met with a lot of different Rothschilds actors, like a lot of different family members. And they were all kind of different. Like reading through some of these interactions, these people all had different perspectives when it came to the whole Zionist movement. Some of them were more interested in it than others. Some of them kind of viewed it as a silly endeavor. They all basically had the same attitude. Their attitude was, why would my life here in London is so great. Like, I'm on top of the world. I'm at the top of the food chain. Why would I pack up and move to Palestine and start all over and, basically like trudge it out in the wilderness with all of you? Like, I have no interest in doing that, but I will help y'all do this. Some of them were like, the reason I'm helping you do this because I'm afraid that all of these dirty Russian Jews, and that's basically what they call them, are going to come to London if we don't send them somewhere else. And they're gonna foment anti-Semitism because they're all such ruthless criminals. This is what they're saying, not my words. But they're all such ruthless criminals over there in the Pale of Settlement because these people, we did a whole episode on the Pale of Settlement, but they're all living in such abject poverty that they've all like turned to a life of organized crime, which is, by the way, where the whole Jewish mafia came from. They all came out of the Pale of Settlement. And that's what their attitude was. Even though they recognize a kinship with them, they recognize a common identity, they also recognize them in their own words as animals, kind of like lesser Jews than them. Like, they kind of viewed the whole Jewish community as one community within the humanity, but they viewed these people in Eastern Europe as dirty animals, in their words. And so because of that, they didn't want these people coming to Western Europe. They didn't want them coming to London, because if they did that, they were going to then become pickpockets, become criminals. And similar to what we're seeing right now occur in the West, where you have all of these migrants from far-flung reaches of the world come to civilized places and unleash hell. And now there's an appetite forming to deport all of them. They were worried the exact same thing was going to happen to them in London. And so they said, you know what? The best thing we could do is probably create this home for them, send them all there so that they don't come here. And so I think it's important for people to understand that dynamic to a certain extent also was there. It doesn't mean that there wasn't a malevolence, like a different kind of malevolence, but that was also a motivating factor. They explicitly told Herzl in multiple meetings, you had multiple Rothschilds say that, where they're like, I don't really care about these people. I don't really have an interest in necessarily helping them per se, but I also don't want them to come here and ruin my life.
Yeah, you brought up something interesting. I'm gonna kind of change gears on you. A great summary of all that. I find it fascinating because you know that stuff way better than I do. You've done the deep dive. I knew it at a high level. But you said something about appetites. There's an appetite growing to send people back home, and that really segues into what's going on in Germany. They are, as of yesterday, closed down their borders. The Schengen Agreement is no longer. You cannot travel through Germany without a passport, and making sure they've now have somewhat tight immigration. And that's part of the populist right uprising throughout Europe we're seeing. It's actually throughout the world. We saw it in Argentina. We thought we were seeing it in Brazil, other places. The rest of the European nations are going to have to respond in kind and tighten up their borders because they don't want to take the rejects from Germany. And you may just have the first chink in the armor that really, that's the thread that's going to unravel the whole EU, which is something I think that for everyone's benefit needs to happen. It was a good idea in paper, but you cannot have an economic union without a political union. You cannot have a political union in Europe. That is just too many different cultures, and you're not going to blend them together.
Yeah, I mentioned this on Badlands Daily weeks back, and I still need to do it. I need to go like 10 years ago, 8 years ago, however long ago it was, sometime in the mid 2010s, when I was spending more time on 4chan. It's a total dumpster fire now in terms of just garbage on there. But back when you could actually go on there and find like useful content, and people would go there to post like good digs and stuff. I remember that this one post kept coming up over and over again where somebody had actually taken the documents from the Third Reich. It was the Third Reich's plan for post-World Europe after they won the war. It's like, here's what we're going to do. Because, the Nazis were prolific bureaucrats, and they like to plan everything out. They were big planners. So they had, their whole scheme of how they were going to reorganize Europe on paper, very detailed. And basically it was a photocopy of what the founding documents of the EU were in 1993. I need to go find that. I need to go find those images and share them, because I remember reading that like at the time and being like, this is, again, 10 years ago. So I didn't think to like archive it or save it, but I just remember thinking, wow, like that is, that's crazy.
Are you suggesting that the same group of American business interests and banking interests that financed the Nazis in the first place, same people that ended up starting our OSS and eventually the CIA and State Department, who've been running our government policy ever since, you think those same people actually won the war?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
The story of the American fascists. I've been talking. You and I have been talking about that for 3 years, and
Yeah.
it all ties in. Can you bring us home? I'm running short on time, and if you want to hit a couple more topics.
Yeah. Let's real quick. I wanted to kind of make a quick connection because we were talking earlier about and then we'll do like a 5-minute thing on Israel, but this will bring us, I think, to Israel. But that guy, Ryan Ralph Ruth, whatever his name is, he appears in the Azov Battalion video in May of 2022. That same month, you have RT reporting that U.S. recruits ISIS terrorists to go fight in Ukraine. And then this guy is also, Ruth, now being accused of doing that because by his own rhetoric, the stuff that he's posting on social media, he was going to Afghanistan to recruit radical Islamic terrorists to go to Ukraine to fight the Russians. And then you have this story from last week. This is from September 10th. Kiev reportedly promised to provide a terrorist organization with dozens of drones in exchange for the release of Chechen and Georgian extremists. Or I'm sorry, not a terrorist organization, but I think Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. I think that's a local government. But they wanted to secure the release of, I'm sorry. Yeah. Leaders of the terrorist organization, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. They had these extremists who were extreme security measures were in place during the negotiations. So they had these guys in their, in captivity, and they said, hey, release these guys, give them to us, and we will give you these drones. They're going to trade drones for terrorists, and then they're going to unleash the terrorists onto the Russian military. So this is kind of crazy, man. And then you have his picture with this chef from DC who happens to be part of the Biden administration. This is a picture of him and this guy in Kiev. That's Kiev in the background.
I'm not seeing this. I'm not seeing the screen.
Oh wait, it's because sorry, it's a rookie move. Thank you for letting me know that. So just to get everyone here, so we have him appearing in the Azov Battalion video. We have this is May, according to Jack Posobiec, May of 2022. That same month, we have RT reporting that the U.S. is recruiting ISIS terrorists to fight in Ukraine. And then last week, September 10th, we have RT also reporting that Ukraine is seeking a deal with Syrian terrorists. This is according to the Turkish media. I think RT was just reposting it. But yeah, so they were going to give them drones in exchange for these Chechen and Georgian extremists who they were then going to unleash onto the Russian military. And then you have a picture of this guy, Ruth, with this DC-based chef. His name is Jose Andres. That's Kiev in the background. This is in Ukraine. And here's another headline from March of 2022. Saying that DC chef Jose Andres is appointed to serve on President Biden's Council on Sports, Fitness, and Nutrition. So he's part of the Biden administration. It's crazy, man. It's crazy. You have Biden administration officials meeting with this guy in 2022. And this guy is also involved by his own admission to recruiting terrorists from Afghanistan to go fight in Ukraine against the Russians. It's insane.
I'm going to be interested to find out where he got his rifle. Because if his criminal record's as bad as, I mean, what do we have? Something like 75 different encounters with the police. He's got some. I know he's a convicted felon from way back, like in 2002. How could he have possibly gotten a gun legally? Yeah. That guy shouldn't have passed a background check anywhere. I mean, bottom line is, the question is, well, did the FBI have him on their radar? Of course they did. They're not incompetent, only when they want to be. But it's. Like I said, that's why I'm so interested to see if DeSantis can keep the investigation in state.
Yeah, well, so that kind of brings us to the final topic that I want to close out with, and that's it's the same topic we closed out with on Badlands Daily yesterday, and I didn't get to give any time to it. We just kind of hit the headline and then logged off. So I want to talk about this for a minute. But so Netanyahu, the big story out of Israel now is that Netanyahu is going to fire the defense minister Gallant and replace him with this other guy, potentially Saar. And so it's important to know that Ben-Gvir and Gallant have never gotten along. Gallant I think Gallant has referred to him as the arsonist for many months now. Like he refers to him as the arsonist. I think. Let me see if I have.
Where does Gallant align with Benny Gantz?
So my understanding from my research is that Gallant and Benny Gantz are political, like traditionally they're political rivals. Because Gallant, let me pull up my my little chart here. So Gallant, I created this a while back. It's been very useful. So I listed it. This is Netanyahu's cabinet, and I listed everybody's political affiliation, their political party. Because remember, there's a multi-party system, so there's political parties all across the entire spectrum. So Gallant is in Netanyahu's Likud party, and the Likud party is large, so they're considered "quote unquote" moderate Likuds, and then there's like the right wingers. But overall, the Likud party falls on the far right of Israeli politics. And by the way, far right does not mean what it means here in America. In America, that means limited government. That means constitutional values. Over there, that means actual fascism, because the entire political spectrum over there is socialism. The people who founded the government back in the 1930s and 40s were all socialists. So the left wing over there is communism, and the right wing is actual fascism. So they are the far right, like the actual far right. Like, so they would identify, or at least their forefathers would self-identify as national socialists, actual Nazis. And so the Likud party is what Gallant comes from. Benny Gantz is considered a centrist. He organized this party called the National Unity Party, I think in 2022. And before that, he had another party that was, again, centrist. So him and Gallant, I think, have actually run for defense minister against one another, and Gallant won. Gantz has also run for many years. He ran against Netanyahu to be prime minister, and Gantz would win, and then Netanyahu would win, and neither one could form a coalition government between 2018 and 2020 until COVID came along, and then they set aside their differences and formed an emergency government. So to answer your question, Gallant and Gantz traditionally were political rivals, but then they started actually to agree like 6 to 8 months ago. They started agreeing because they were both publicly saying, hey, Netanyahu doesn't have a plan, it seems, to actually round out this war and finish it. Because remember, both of these guys, Gallant and Gantz, were high-ranking IDF generals. So they both are military guys with a military background. So they were both in agreement that there was no military solution really to the Hamas issue. You couldn't destroy Hamas because it's an idea. It's not like an actual physical thing. And so it's silly to say that you're going to eradicate it with bombs and bullets. So they started to publicly agree on that. So back in March, I think it was, Netanyahu actually fired Gallant because Gallant went so public with that statement. He ends up bringing Gallant back in and reappointing him as defense minister. And then Benny Gantz in June, I think it was June 10th or June 9th of this year, he resigns because he's like, this is silly. And so his resignation was a big deal because the way the governments operate in these multi-party systems, this is in Europe and in Israel, is that you have to have like a certain number of people, as I understand it, supporting you. And if enough people resign from the government, then the government falls apart, and then you have to have new elections like within 3 months or something. And so the idea is that if one more person resigns from his inner circle, meaning any of these people in this box right here, but also I think a number of people from out here, if any of these people resign, he's done. So these three at the bottom are all the psychopaths. This guy's kind of a yes man, as I understand it.
Can't see the screen.
You're kidding.
No, rookie move twice today, buddy.
Man, I'm really losing it here. Okay, so again, these are all the people, and these are the political parties. So you have Gallant and Gantz. These are the two guys I've been talking about. Gallant is in Netanyahu's party. Gantz is the outsider. He's called a minister without portfolio. That means he was brought in just to be a part of the Israeli war cabinet. So when Israel goes to war, they form a 3-man war cabinet, and those three are supposed to vote on all the military action. So before that, he wasn't a minister in the cabinet. Netanyahu brings him in because he knows that having Gantz on board is how he's going to get the public on board, because the public likes Gantz. So once Gantz resigns in June, if one more person resigns from this little box right here, the government falls apart and they have to hold elections. And Netanyahu is probably not winning another election in Israel. I think the public has turned against him to a certain extent that he's not going to win another election.
My understanding is, once he's out of office, that's why he's trying so hard to restructure their judicial system. Is they've got charges ready to go against him. He's going to jail.
Yeah, exactly. And the charges, to be frank, like I've looked into to a certain extent, the charges seem legitimate. Now they're not as severe as they could be. They could have gone way more. It's like embezzlement. It's like receiving gifts, like cigars, and like it's stuff that's pretty low hanging fruit. Though he will suffer, like he could potentially go to jail for it. So it's not as severe as it could be. Like they could throw way worse charges at him. Because I know there are people who like to compare it to like, well, this is what they're doing to Trump. I don't think it's exactly what they're doing to Trump. I think Netanyahu has made a lot of enemies in Israel over the many years, and I think people are sick of him in certain factions of the government, which is why he's now has to rely on these crazy people to support him because he's lost the support of centrists like these two. And so now the news now is that he's going to fire Gallant. Like as of like maybe today or tomorrow, like who knows, imminently he's going to fire Gallant. This is something that's been leaked to the media by Netanyahu. He's the one who leaked it. And he's going to fire Gallant and he's going to bring this guy over here, Gideon Saar, who's another minister without portfolio. He's going to bring him in to be the new defense minister. And as I understand it, according to like Napolitano, Judge Napolitano and Scott Ritter, Gideon Saar is, because I haven't really looked into him too much, he's even more of a war hawk than any of these guys are. Now he's also publicly said, what I have read about him is that he's also said that, if I am appointed defense minister, it doesn't mean I'm going to be a yes man. If Netanyahu and I disagree, I'm going to butt heads. But that could just be, political posturing. So it doesn't really mean a lot.
The scenario you're describing, backed up against a lot of these people want this greater Israel. Well, I'm going to tie this into Ukraine because Zelensky is acting like a absolute suicidal maniac. The only way Zelensky stays in power, or Ukraine doesn't become a backwater, landlocked, nothing of a country, is if we get World War III. Same thing with Israel. The only way Netanyahu stays in power, there's no winning, beating Hamas. You're not going to wipe them out completely without genocide is not going to be allowed, even though a lot of people would argue it's already happening. No, we're talking full genocide isn't going to happen. They're not going to get their greater Israel. We saw what the Houthis could do with a single missile and get to the most sophisticated air defense system in the world. What do you think Iran's got? So the military, neither side, neither Ukraine nor Israel, has the military capability to fulfill with their stated military goals without the United States getting involved. And that's why we're sitting here in very precarious times, because we don't know who's really calling the shots in the White House. And we have an election coming. So everything is on the table, so that's why I don't sleep as well at night as I'd like to.
And according to McGregor says that the people in Washington are actually scared now. Like they're actually legitimately scared. And they all apparently told the head of CENTCOM has gone to Israel now twice in the past 5 or 6 days, because he went once and he said, look, if y'all go to war, we are not going to support any offensive action against Lebanon or Hezbollah. So if you do that, if you go against Lebanon or Hezbollah or Iran, you're on your own. We are not backing you. We will help you, protect you against Hamas and anything that Hezbollah or Iran does to you, defensively, but we're not going to back you if you go on the offense. And I think these guys think that they can trick DC, trick Washington, the Pentagon, into helping them. Now, again, this could all just be posturing, but this is according to McGregor and Scott Ritter, and I certainly trust their insights when it comes to that stuff. But they're saying that basically these guys are not going to back them. They're trying to trick DC into doing it. And when you describe the Houthis missile, they have the U.S. has ships parked off the coast in Israel that are designed to protect against these missiles. The Houthis have assembled their own hypersonic missile using Iranian parts. They said they built it themselves, manufactured it themselves. It's technically a hypersonic missile. It penetrated every single defense system that Israel has and every single defense system that these warships have, and it hit its target in Israel, whatever the target was, some transportation hub or whatever.
There was an English ship there too, and that's supposed to be one of the better it beat the English technology as well. So it beat three technology systems.
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is
So
pretty.
yeah. I mean, it's pretty good. So to wrap this up, because I know we got to jump off. What the reason that Galan is getting fired is because Galan has now publicly come out and said, we in the IDF, meaning the IDF, the lower rungs of the IDF. This is according to all these guys I've been referencing. The lower rungs of the IDF have all told them, we don't have the resources. We are completely exhausted. We've been getting our ass kicked in Hamas or in Gaza by Hamas. We can't fight a war with Hezbollah right now, who, by the way, are about 10 times stronger, 100 times stronger than Gaza. Hamas are a bunch of guys fighting tennis shoes. They're a bunch of like third world guerrillas. Hezbollah is like a legitimate military with tanks and mechanized units. And, they've been fighting because Hezbollah has been fighting in Syria for 10 to 12 years with the Russians against ISIS and NATO. So they actually have a lot of combat experience and are a far more sophisticated military. They said, we can't fight these guys. If you go to war with these guys, we're all going to die. So we're not going to fight this war. Netanyahu's not accepting that. So that's why he's going to fire Gallant. He's going to bring in Saar. Saar's already said he wants war. He wants war with Hezbollah. And I think his exact words were, anyone who attacks, I do remember reading this, anyone who attacks Israel will lose territory. That is the cost of attacking Israel. So because these people have attacked Israel, we now have to take their land from them. And again, Greater Israel, that feeds into the idea of Greater Israel. So that's where we stand.
Yeah, and there's a ticking time bomb on all of this. You and I have talked about this before. The Israeli economy isn't going to hold up very much longer under this. They've got, right now, the big part of Israel's economy is technology sector. The venture capital money is dried up. Nobody is investing in that environment, with as many missiles flying. It's just not going to happen. Without that venture capital dollars, mostly from America and Europe, their economy is drained. And of course, we already know that, how successful the boycotts have been and banning them. At the same time, you've got Ukraine's got a ticking time bomb too. That's not much longer. I mean, Zelensky's maybe got through the winter at most before the Russians will really just rout the last of their resources. I'm surprised it hasn't happened already. So you got two very desperate regimes, both that need the United States to bail them out militarily, and I just pray that does not happen.
It's funny you say that because McGregor said the same exact thing, and I thought of you. I thought of you the moment he said it. He said that the Israeli economy is basically already collapsed. He said this is the longest war because Israel has fought many wars in its history. It's fought many wars with Palestine. This is the longest war they've ever fought. Most of the wars they've fought in their past, the U.S. backed them, and they were able to wrap things up. The 6-Day War is like one of the more famous ones, right? So you're talking about a 6-day war. You're talking about maybe like a month-long war. Nothing that's lasted a year, and we're coming up on a year now. So their economy, because all these people who are fighting in the IDF, a lot of them are reservists. So they're leaving their businesses behind, and they're going and they're fighting in the IDF. Their businesses are now bankrupt, right? I mean, and then you also have money leaving Israel because investors don't feel safe, or they have political positions that are contrary to the Israeli government. And according to McGregor, basically Israel's on life support right now, thanks to the U.S. the Western backers, Britain, London, DC.
Very good.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, I appreciate you joining me, Brady. It's always a pleasure having you. Glad we were able to kind of just fly by the seat of our pants here. So
yeah, I like unscripted. It's a good way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to let you sign off because I know you got to go. I'm sorry I didn't see that message. But so thank you again. I'm going to do an ad read while when you leave, and we will see you next time we have you, man.
Can I tell them where to find me?
Yes, please give us your coordinates.
Get me on Twitter at war_hamster1776, True Social at war_hamster, and my best content is on my Rumble channel, War Space Hamster. A lot of good stuff that we touched some of the stuff at a high level, going into a lot more depth about some of the ISDS and other banking connections to our intelligence agencies, and I got some good stuff coming out on that. So please come check it out.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks again, Brady, and we will see you next time.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Have a good day. All right. Yep. Well, thanks everyone for joining. I'm going to real quick. I'm going to do a quick ad read, and then we'll hit some rants and we'll get out of here. And I apologize for some of the technical issues today. I'm used to having a co-host who also has screen sharing powers. So normally, like if CanCon or Matt sees me talking and they can't see my screen, they throw the screen up for me. I forgot that Brady does not have that capability. So let's do Golka. The 2024 election is approaching, bringing the potential impact on our finances. With $6 trillion in taxes in play, it's a great time to consider buying gold. Gold prices have been soaring lately as more people turn to gold to safeguard their assets against the looming threat of a recession or debt-induced currency crisis. Join the thousands of hardworking Americans who are taking proactive steps to safeguard their savings with Goldco. With over 10 years of experience, our partners at Goldco have established themselves as a top player in the gold industry. Their buyback guarantee assures you that if your situation changes, they will repurchase your metals at the best price, providing you with peace of mind. Head over to our Goldco partners at badlandsgold.com today to claim your free gold and silver kit. You may even qualify for up to 10% back in bonus silver. Visit badlandsgold.com and take control of your financial destiny. All right. Well, thank you, Goldco. Sorry, I think I read that way too quickly. And then we're going to hear from our friend Mike Lindell.
I'm excited to announce my all-new mattress topper. In the times we're in, I wanted to bring you the best affordable mattress topper ever. So I took my two best technologies and combined them to make the ultimate mattress topper. And now you can get it for as low as $69.98. Queen size, only $99.98. It all starts with my famous MyPillow foam that provides you that overall full body support. Second is the individual comfort supports that give you an amazing custom sleep experience. It's like it's made specifically for you. The queen size alone has over 14,000 comfort supports. This is the perfect mattress topper to improve any bed. New bed, old bed, your guest beds. Get them for every bedroom in your house. Go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get the all-new My Mattress Topper for as low as $69.98. Queen size, only $99.98. Don't delay. Order today.
All right. And finally, we will hit the rants. So we have Pow Truth. $5. Ghost, I'm in your area and have been thinking about putting on a film festival locally, but maybe in over my head and better for Badlands to lead. DM on X at this name if you're open to discussing. I appreciate the rant and appreciate the offer. That's above my pay grade. I doubt Badlands is going to take the lead in it. If you're putting on a film festival, though, I mean, I'd be happy to talk to you about it. Yeah, just shoot me a message on X. I mean, we can talk, but as far as a Badlands, that's not something that I would be being involved. That's not something that I would have the authority to negotiate or anything on their behalf. So I wouldn't be speaking for them. I'd just be speaking for myself. But thanks for the rant. Then I saw Sammy. You came in here with one. DD. I hope I'm saying that right. D-Dale DD. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but $10. Great show. Thank you. Appreciate that. And then Sammy the Squirrel, $5. Thanks for continuing the show with the show today and for getting my fellow rodent war hamster on and picked his brain. Yeah, Sammy, I know we both know Brady, and Brady's great. And we appreciate him coming in the last minute and pitch hitting for Matt. Hope everyone enjoyed it and found our musings insightful. So we'll be back next week with the normal show, normal cast. Hit me up on X. Hit me up on Telegram if y'all have any questions or have any suggestions for topics. Otherwise, go check out Badlands Media Substack. I do the Badlands News Brief every day with Burning Bright and Ash. You can kind of get some geopolitical musings from there. But other than that, we will just call it a day. So y'all have a great day. Thanks for watching.